Thank you, Greg. Sounds like everybody should be able to hear me okay. The clicker is working. That's good. If you do not have access to a protocol droid, translation into BASIC will be available on the standard galactic frequencies. So my talk is going to cover two parts, monitoring and control. Please do stick around for the control section. You must learn control. Non-humans, the target audience includes programmers like myself, other people to use Todd's memorable phrase, don't shower, but do drink Mountain Dew, and whatever form of primitive forms of automation the Terran technical base can support. Going right on into monitoring, I wanted to mention the read-only REST API. Oh, I should mention actually on this slide as well, I don't expect anybody to learn anything during this talk. This is another one of those talks where we're going to talk about something very, very quickly in hopes that it just leaves enough of a memory in your mind that when you want to accomplish some task later on, you say, oh, that's right. That guy that was talking to aliens that one Wednesday morning, I should go ask him, or I should go look at his slides, figure out what the references were. The read-only REST API, big reason I want to talk about this one is that it's not in the Condor manual. It's not currently officially supported by Condor, although it is in our GitHub projects repo. REST APIs in general, rather, are of course common web standards. You can even use them from Bash. The REST API is provided by the by WSGI application that uses the Condor Python bindings. Being a standard web API, it of course returns JSON blobs about various different things of interest, those being the job queue, the job history, Condor configuration, and various different aspects of machine status. Like I said, I'm mentioning this because it's not officially supported. If you do find it interesting and useful, please do let us know. We might be able to change that. We gave a talk about this back in 2020. I haven't had enough feedback about it to officially support it yet, so do be sure to tell us if you do use it. I wanted to talk about event logs a little bit briefly. You're probably familiar with these. But for those of you who aren't, they look something like this example up here in the fixed fit font. Those ellipses are actually not abbreviations. They're actually part of the event log. They separate the different events from each other. So what you see, there are three distinct events. These are, of course, both machine and droid readable. That's very much on purpose. You probably know how to get these already, at least if you were paying attention this morning. You set log equals file.log in your job descriptions. Main reason to do that from the automation point of view is you get all sorts of nifty little tricks when you do. You can use Condor user log on a log that contains multiple jobs events or multiple job event logs to generate some very interesting summaries. This is Greg's favorite new toy, so expect to see interesting new things from that in the coming year. We have talked about DAGman. That's normally how you're going to wait on job completion. But if that's a little too heavyweight for you, or if you need to do something that DAGman can't when that job completes, you can use the Condor wait command in order to wait for a job to finish. Big reason though, all your presentations that you've seen so far have used Condor watch queue rather than watch Condor queue. The former is written in pure Python using the Python bindings. That is a phrase I'm going to be saying a lot during this presentation. Uses the job event log API. While you should find that interesting as a potential source to harvest code from, the bigger benefit is that Condor watch queue doesn't use any SCED resources. So it's much lighter weight, much less of an effect on your busy system. For more system administration side of monitoring and automation, you can get these event logs. You can get a single global event log for all of the jobs on the AP. And this is a configuration option that you can set. That's what the invert text is there for. And that event log link goes directly to the right part of the Condor manual. Creates a single file to which all the jobs are written. So that you don't have to do anything crazy like trying to modify every job on submission in order to set an event log. This is interesting in and of itself. You can get a very good chronological idea about what's going on with your jobs. That's the major benefit of an event log from the debugging point of view over just taking a look at a history or a class add in the active queue. Excuse me. If you need a little more information, let's say you're curious about what exactly is going on with your GPU jobs, they're all misbehaving in some way, you can add information about a job's attributes to the event log by setting that configuration knob right there on the second bullet point. This has been at least partially obsoleted in version 10.6 if you're in the feature series and keeping up with your upgrades. Condor now automatically writes a number of interesting job attributes to the execute event, in the execute alone, event alone. And there's of course a knob that you can look up to add custom attributes if for whatever reason the standard ones don't cover your needs. Another thing that you're going to be hearing a lot through this talk, the global event log can also be written in JSON, so there's the option to do that. I bring up the UTC timestamp option here only to observe that the parents think that this means universal time coordinates. Condor Ad Stash, I've been talking a lot about custom monitoring tools. Condor Ad Stash is a standard monitoring tool that we include for its job history information from the Condor SCED or the Condor StartD to Elasticsearch. Like I've been talking about, it can also write JSON results out to a file instead. If for some reason your network is not as hospitable perhaps as you would like, or if your tool accepts JSON but not perhaps in the Elasticsearch network format. The big benefit of this tool is that it automatically keeps track of jobs that it may have seen already when it looks at those files. It handles all the rotation, all that stuff for you. Go ahead and take a look at the man page. Also wanted to briefly get a call out to Condor Ganglia D in here, which may be useful. If you already have Ganglia set up, it does the same sort of thing as Condor Ad Stash. I didn't put this in the table of contents. I wanted to mention them very briefly though. StartD crons and SCED crons. Particularly useful in the StartD because the output of these jobs, of these scripts, modifies the StartD ad. And so there's a particular example, I think that's very good, how to use this to automate your benefit. Custom attribute technically has CVMFS, a lot of people use it. Indicates that the job when it's running has access to CVMFS. That is not necessarily true all the time for every machine. So what you can do is you can write a little script. I believe WMS does this for you. That is a Condor StartD cron job. Checks to see if CVMFS is still up, tells the StartD which one is which, so it doesn't waste any time trying to run jobs that it can't. The SCED equivalent also modifies the SCED's job, the SCED's ad in the collector. That's not nearly as useful as modifying the StartD's ad, but it can be very useful to have a cron variant available to you in more limited situations. If you're running an API out of a container, for instance, where you don't already have a full-fledged cron to use. I want to transition between monitoring and control by talking about the command line interface a little bit. The command line interface is, of course, the standard way to control Condor, but it can also be useful for, there's also some useful things I should point out about it for monitoring. We have like 60, 70 options for each of Condor Q and Condor Status. 3 that I want to call out. Everybody's probably familiar with the auto format option, which is super handy, convenient, and useful if you're doing Condor Status interactively. If your monitoring system requires output in a weird format, the dash format option can be a very good way of generating that. Also, be very precise about the output, more so than you can be with auto format usually. Of course, these tools also both take the JSON option in case your tooling is already based on JSON. That can be very convenient. TJ wanted me to point out the print format templates. Those can be useful in terms of automating certain reports to your users if you have specific interesting things you want to point out to them because you know stuff about their workflow. They can also give you access to certain aggregation functions that you would normally have access to in Condor Status and Condor Q. I also wanted to call out the HTCondor noun verb tool, not necessarily because it's useful to programmers, automators, and droids, but because it might serve as a source of useful Python code. Those are all written in Python using the Python bindings. We will be supporting them for quite some time, and we'd like to think our code serves as a good example. Maybe it doesn't always, but you can at least look at it and learn from our mistakes. So job, set, DAG, event log, and annex, those are the 5 nouns that we cover right now. Not all of those are actually in a release version of Condor. Lastly, the last thing I wanted to mention about the command line interface are the Condor Chirp and Condor SSH to job tools. Hopefully you are familiar with Condor SSH to job, probably have some frustration with it not working as well as you'd really like it to in a lot of situations. We're sorry about that. But Condor Chirp can be really useful for job specific monitoring in as much as you can run Condor Chirp at any time during your job, as long as you asked for the IO proxy of the job submit file. Use it to either update the job ad or, depending on how you're automating things, write a message to the job event log. Excuse me, that can be very useful for figuring out how your job is progressing in cases where it's not always easy to tell. And if you happen to see the same "I'm doing step 3" message 4 or 5 times, maybe you have a more serious problem that you need to think about and look into. Counter SSH to job correspondingly allows you to push stuff into the job, whether that's files. You can run a command over there and say, send a sig up to your simulation, right? You tried step 3 5 times, go get another random seed and try again, perhaps. So that might be useful for some sort of call and response computational steering at a very basic level. Snakes. Why did it have to be snakes? So unlike a certain very brave archaeologist, most programmers and myself are actually rather fond of Python. Oh, and I'm sorry, I've confused my Terran mythologies. I'm going to stop trying to tell jokes about it right now. I don't want to offend anyone by accident. So we're going to be completely serious and straightforward throughout the rest of this talk. There are 5 modules in the bindings right now, at least 5 that I bothered you want to talk about. The class add and the counter module are the big 2. We'll be going into a little more detail there. What I want to mention here, just very briefly, the class add module behaves a little differently, very little bit differently, depending on if it's used alone or with HTCondor. So do be aware of that. We have documentation about that online. HTCondor HTchirp, I did just mention the chirp tool. That was a command line tool. HTCondor HTchirp is a pure Python reimplementation of that tool. We thought that was worth doing because in a lot of cases, it's going to be way easier to move some pure Python around than it is to get access to the Condor binaries and their libraries. We know that most of you automators, most of you non-humans, write your DAG submit files with a script or via a script, possibly multiple layers of scripts. HTCondor DAGs is an attempt to make that a little bit easier in Python, introduce a little bit more of a layer of abstraction there to the generation of DAG submit files. Last thing I wanted to talk about before I get back to the Condor module was HTCondor Personal. Personal Condor is our kind of in-house term for Condor system, where all the parts of the system are running on the same machine as the same non-root user. We use this concept extensively, although not this actual code, in our own testing suite. So this might be very useful to you in terms of testing some of your automation, being able to spin up and stand down these things in a Python-controlled, very automatic, automatable way. The Condor Python module allows you to do a bunch of different things, hopefully everything that you want to get done. Query the collector, you can query the sched D, you can talk to other daemons like the start D directly. You can access the Condor configuration system, you can submit jobs, you can submit jobs, you can submit jobs, and you can submit jobs. We've got like 8 different ways of doing it. A bunch of them are broken. We're trying really hard to document all the various broken bits and deprecate them and get them out of your way. I'm not doing that super fast because we know that some people have some success with some of these methods. So do be careful when you're reading the documentation. Look for the deprecated tags. Look at our examples. I think we finished updating them all so that we'll be submitting jobs the correct way. But that's a landmine for everyone here. We are sorry about that. You can manage security credentials to a certain extent. You can turn daemons off. You can reconfigure them. You can drain start Ds. You can pull or wait for job events. That's that job event log class and module I mentioned earlier. Actually, that was a class, my bad. We do have interactive tutorials. They're fairly extensive. I'd help you get up to speed on the Condor HTCondor Python module, HTCondor bindings. We even have a recorded tutorial from last year that goes over it in more detail. Last thing I wanted to talk about was to tell you that Matt told me to include this slide. It is probably complete gibberish to everyone who does not A, have a local issuer, and B, wants to submit jobs from Python. If you need to cause the local issuer to trigger when you submit jobs from Python, this is how you do it. Now, you know, that's up there for reference when you grab the slides later. Anybody have any questions?